Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A storm has enveloped Washington, and I'm not just talking about the snow that came down last night, but the chaos that's being inflicted by DOGE, better named DOGE, since its accountability is totally lacking. Dodging the law, dodging accountability, dodging this Congress. The bill before us deals with stolen checks. The urgent attention of this committee should be focused on stolen privacy. The richest man in the world and his Musketeers have invaded the privacy of every American by accessing confidential information like tax records, social security numbers, healthcare records, data so sensitive that in some cases it can lead to a 5-year prison term. The former nonpartisan top career officer at the Treasury rebuffed the Musketeer who wanted to gain access to this very information and pause payments. This trusted guardian of our privacy for more than 35 years at the Treasury Department was then pushed out of his job for trying to protect this highly sensitive information. Normally, there would be an independent watchdog to respond to such wrongdoing. But in this case, the Inspector General at the Treasury Department, like 16 other such watchdogs, had been fired by President Trump so that there was no accountability and no oversight, and there still is not. The 25-year-old Musketeer who gained access to these tax payments, as I mentioned in the questions to Mr. Barthold, for the record says he's a racist before it was cool. He denigrated Indian Americans. He had also proclaimed, which is interesting given the work this committee did last year, quote, "I would not mind at all if Gaza and Israel were both wiped off the face of the earth." None of this bothered Trump, who approved rehiring this fired employee, and none of it seems to concern this committee. When alarm rose over Musk's access to such sensitive information, the Trump administration response was that Musk minions had read-only access to just look at the information, not to change it. While DOGE dodges any transparency on its operations, an affidavit filed yesterday by a Bureau of Financial Services official confirms that the 25-year-old was granted privileges to write code. Concerned Treasury employees believe that he has already made extensive changes to 2 of the most sensitive systems at the Bureau of Fiscal Service, an agency that paid out over $5 trillion last fiscal year. The payments processed by the Bureau of Fiscal Service include federal tax returns, Social Security benefits, supplemental Social Security, and veterans pay. And Mr. Musk has already boasted that he blocked payments to Lutheran Social Services and the Agency for International Development. Does this committee have the slightest curiosity about how this invasion of these sensitive systems will impact Americans? It doesn't appear they do. While our paper currency says "in God we trust" for this committee and this Republican-controlled Congress, it appears that it is simply "in Elon we trust." He determines whether he has any conflict of interest himself. He may not provide the slightest evidence to support his repeated claims of fraud, abuse, and corruption. Corruption, which seems to be the term always applied to whoever may choose to disagree with this administration. Fortunately, a federal judge was a little more concerned than this committee or our Republican colleagues throughout the Congress. He noted that access of this information heightens the risk of leaks and that it makes these systems that we rely on for all the federal payments more liable to be hacked. Finding that there was a risk of irreparable harm, that judge has temporarily restricted access to the Treasury Department's payment and demanded that all the copies be returned. In response, President Trump called this ruling, quote, "a disgrace," and said that, quote, "no judge should frankly be allowed to make that kind of decision." Vice President Vance sent up the first trial balloon that Trump could just ignore the judge who ordered the protection, and of course Musk condemned corrupt judges. Asked yesterday if he would violate court orders, the president basically replied, "not yet." He wanted to appeal first. There's another word for the unitary executive theory that is being urged in court by Trump's lawyers and permeates Project 25. an approach that insists an infallible president can ignore both this Congress and any judicial oversight. It's called dictatorship, and I yield back.